I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 134. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter.
Probably tell people who I am.
That was like literally perfect.
It's a good way to start.
Yeah, that wasn't. He didn't know I pushed record and he said that. Well, yeah, this week we have Derek on the podcast, who is my husband. And he was on the podcast in September.
Hi, guys.
I interviewed him on the We Things Matter, so you can go back and listen to that. People really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Good job.
Thanks.
This is funny. Our setup is funny. We actually have a holiday dinner party to go to, so we're a little spruced up, and we stopped by the office to do this because this is when we have a sitter, and this is when it works. So
glorious.
It is glorious, and we do have a glass of wine, which is fun. And we're sitting very close to the mic, and I said, "You got to come closer." I said, "I know it's awkward." And he said, "Well, isn't that the point, is to not feel awkward when you're having a conversation?" But
Here we are.
Here we are, really close. Well, we decided to do this episode. It felt like a good way to round out the year to be reflective. You know, I get to watch clients go through things, hard things, and that's part of the deal as a business owner. And you never know what version you're going to get or what flavor you're going to get, but it's not a cakewalk to be an owner, as every one of you listening knows. And so Derek and I have been reflecting a lot, having conversations about how hard it was to lift Velocity Work off the ground.
Right.
And not hard in that, yeah, it's hard to build a business, but life happens and you still own a business. And that is a dynamic that you have to navigate. And I don't think many people have ever really heard the story of lifting it off the ground because my head's been down and I've just been doing it. And the companies.
Yeah, you've had a good year.
Yeah, it's great. And this is going to continue. And so it's a good time to reflect, like, oh man, how far we've come, which has been pretty amazing. It's been a wild ride and one that I'm really grateful for.
Yeah. So I think the plan is for me to kind of ask you questions to sort of walk through the early Velocity Work experience and some of the friction and challenges and hurdles and stuff like that you and we went through as this all kind of got started.
And I think it's probably worth noting, and I would love for you to share. The reason I think you're a good person to have this conversation with is because you started a company.
Yeah.
And you know what it's like. And it was really rough for you at points. So you're no stranger to this.
Yeah, I don't think any business has a pretty founding story necessarily. And it's, 90% of businesses don't make it through that. And I think you should be really proud that you're here and you have a business and you have a great community of clients. And it's easy to forget that it didn't look like, it's just hard to see that from the beginning. And so it's super common. I think, I work with a ton of startups and they all have their challenges. They all have their hurdles. They all have their times when it feels like it's just not going to work. So
I lost a thought. Actually. Sorry. But
so why don't you take yourself back to the beginning? You were full-time employed. You were traveling pretty much full-time. I don't think
pretty much.
Well, yeah, that's true. So I think some weeks you were taking 4 to 6 flights inside of a week. And from my perspective, you enjoyed what you were doing in certain ways, and in other ways, it felt like it wouldn't last forever. So why don't you talk about why it led to what became Velocity Work?
Yes. So one of my favorite things that I was responsible for doing at the consulting company I worked for was strategic planning retreats. And I did a lot more than that, but that was the favorite piece of what I did. And it was the most rewarding to see people light up at the end of the retreats. Like they had such a great plan. And then I go back in 90 days to that same client. And we had clients all over the US, Canada, and beyond, but I was usually mostly US and Canada. And sometimes I would get to go back to the same client's office at 90 days and their stuff wasn't done. They had this perfect plan and it just was half baked. So essentially, over the course of my time there, I realized that we weren't supporting the owners. We were missing something. And it's really easy to say it's on them. But I knew because of my coaching background that there could have been tweaks made that would have made all the difference for owners. So I got curious about that, and I was tired of traveling full time and I wanted my life back. It was such a good run and I loved my job, but at some point you just get exhausted zigzagging back and forth across the states. So I started thinking about bringing strategic planning retreats to small businesses generally. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where the idea started, was like this, I see the magic in them, and most business starters don't do that. And I knew that because you had been a business owner, you had had companies and been involved with startups, and people don't do this. They know they should, but they don't because it's hard. And doing it on your own is very different than having a facilitator.
Right.
So that's where the idea started.
Yeah.
And that was 2017. Mm-hmm. It was the very end of 2017, like towards the end, when I was like, okay, I think I'm going to go for this.
Yeah, but talk about what that meant, right? Like you basically started working on this nights and weekends, and well, actually early mornings and weekends. And that was more conceptual mostly, right? Like how does this business look? What am I going to do? Like, why does it exist? Mm-hmm. And, working full time. And in many ways, your days were a full days of work and then a 2 or 3 hour travel home, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And we were in San Francisco at the time. So talk a little bit about like moonlighting is actually the term for that.
Actually, we were in Denver already when I started this. But yeah.
Caveat to everyone, I have a terrible memory. So
I don't think you do. That's funny that you think you do. I don't think he does. But I have a better memory. I do know that. So yeah, the nights and weekends thing was real in the morning. So basically I traveled east a lot. And I learned very quickly, and for those of you who've traveled a lot before, you know that this is true. It is harder to travel east than it is to travel west. I really believe that, especially if you need to be up at a normal time of day. I mean, you're basically losing 2 to 3 hours depending on where you're flying from. And so I would go to the Eastern time zone a lot, and I had to be at the client's office at 7:30 on the dot, so really earlier to be safe. So I had to leave most of the time my hotel at 7, sometimes earlier. And the only space I had to work on this business was mornings. And I was dialed. I was so motivated. I really wanted to lift this off the ground. I wanted to do this. And so I would wake up sometimes at 3:30 a.m., sometimes at 4:30 a.m. It really just depended on what I thought I could do, and work until I had to leave. I'd get up and then work until I had to leave. And then that is really how this company was built. That was it. So we really started the company January 2018, we put our foot on the gas with like getting ducks in a row and through conversations, which maybe I should back up, but I had a business partner when we started.
Oh yeah. Right. Yeah. Talk about how that happened. I mean, yeah, she's my cousin. Side note.
She is. Yeah.
Shout out to Tracy. We love you.
Tracy's amazing. I was talking, at family gatherings at the end of 2017 about like what I want to do, what I'm thinking, what's in my head. And Tracy was in a period where she was kind of between things, and she's a badass. And I knew that, and it intrigued her. And so she was interested, and we met for a weekend and just hammered stuff out one weekend in January. And it went from there in some weird little town in Michigan, because it was between where I was traveling and where she could meet me or something.
Right.
And yeah, that's where it started. And it was like full on, like full throttle ever since that weekend. It's never slowed down since that weekend.
Yeah.
I haven't thought of it like that before, but when I look back, that was it.
Yeah. I mean, I always feel like there's the idea stage where you can talk a lot about what something might be. And then there's the point at which you like strap on the skis and push off, and you can't go back up, right? Like you have to like get down to the bottom of the mountain, and that can look a lot of different ways. And it can look like quitting, right? It can look like we were wrong, or I was wrong, or I actually don't want to do this, or it just doesn't work, or whatever. But it's a completely different experience once you cross over into stage. Yeah, that stage where you're actually doing the work and you're actually like out trying to figure out if it's actually going to be a thing that works for you.
Well, and actually, I'm so grateful for you because I always have believed in validating your product. And everybody believes in that, but I'd never really done that before. I knew that enough. And I knew how important it was, but it didn't ever feel, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't have access to any clients. I didn't know how I was going to get my first client.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I just said that. So I've owned a business before. I started a coaching practice 2008. And it never lifted off the ground. Like I had a lot to learn. I didn't know what I was doing. I made a lot of mistakes. It shaped and informed how I did it the second time for sure.
Yeah. So I think maybe since you're in that headspace, talk a little bit about what was different about, the first few months right around this time period with Tracy. And because I know I met you sort of, I guess, on some level at the tail end of that coaching business. And I was running my first startup. 12. And, so I had some perspective on what you had focused on when you were, quote unquote, trying to start that business.
What do you mean, quote unquote?
Sorry.
I was trying to start that business. I don't know what that was.
I misspoke. But I guess on some level too, it was important to me that if you were going to do this and take it seriously, that it didn't look like that first effort, right? Years later, having been inside of a real company doing work that, taught you certain things about the type of work that you might do inside of something like Velocity Work, but you still really had no customers, you had no, really even product on some level. And so, but your approach was very obviously different. And then also we were together, and I know as we think about it that I was harping on really trying to focus on what mattered. And so maybe talk a little bit about that, or how different it was from your first attempt.
Yeah, that I think was a huge key difference. Was just I knew really early I had to validate something in order to really push it further to market. And I didn't understand that the first time around. I was just throwing things at the wall and super misguided. It was what it was, and I learned a lot from it, but it's unfortunate when I look back, that business was never going to make it the way that I was approaching it. Yeah. And so this time around, we found 2 business owners, partners of a creative agency.
Found.
Who we happen to be related to.
Tracy's husband.
Yeah.
What up, Bob?
Yeah. But they were super willing to do it, but they didn't really know what they were getting themselves into. So we flew to Minneapolis for reasons that made sense for their business. We met in the middle. So went to Minneapolis, got in a hotel room for 2 days, and I led them through strategic planning in the best way I knew how, because I had been doing it for private practice owners for so long that I didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't know if I had the ability to be able to do it for just any business.
Yeah, you didn't know if it translates outside of kind of the environment you were in.
Yeah.
Right?
Turns out it did.
Yeah. And also, on some level, of course it was someone we knew or were related to. That's the thing, is it doesn't matter. You should go find the most available resource if it's actually going to deliver learning, right? And that was what I was really trying to push, was how fast can you learn what you need to learn?
Yes.
Right. And side note, had to fly to Minneapolis for 2 days, and it was so effing cold. It was literally unbelievable.
It was February. So Tracy and I got in a room in January 2018, and in February 2018, we got in a room with Bob and Ross. Awesome. I just think of Bob Ross every time I say Bob and Ross. We got in a room with them, and I led them through the framework. Of course, I had to tailor it, and I did so many hours of prep before I walked into that room, because I really needed to understand their business and understand how to break things out and be helpful. and useful. And it was worth it. It took so much studying and digging and data and all that, but it was worth it. And it worked. And they were pumped. They were so pumped at the end of that. And it was very exciting to see. And we talked about what they would actually pay for something like that. If they knew what they would have gotten out of it up front, what they would have paid, what the value was, and it was way more than I thought that they were going to say. I think at the time it was like,
I was just going to say, do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was $6,000 for that session. And for me back then, just testing, I was pumped about that. Yeah. And a business I had never even dabbled in before.
Well, an industry that you'd never.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
That you had like zero context for.
Yeah. It did make me realize very quickly that I could not do just small business. I wouldn't survive. It's not scalable. I would have to learn that business so deeply to be as valuable as I would want to be.
Well, I think too, one of the hardest parts of that was learning the ins and outs kind of in some ways with them in the room. Whereas you were used to completely understanding the business before you got in the room, right? Like you had been a dental hygienist, you had been working in the industry, and like, so you were familiar with certain types of work and industries and business structures. And then to like almost like start from zero, it was really clear, I think, that was going to be really hard to scale. So like if every client meant that, it was like every client meant 3 weeks of prep and possibly asking the wrong questions when you got in the room, right?
But you're even saying 3 weeks of prep. That was 3 weeks of just burying myself in it. Yeah, so really it was more than that if you're going to live a normal life.
I mean, it's really important. Like first attempt, it was like over a month of effort to even like have it occur. And then on reflection, maybe talk a little bit about where it went, right? Like, so where you and Tracy ended up after that.
Yeah. So Tracy, she's so organized and so dialed and so on top of things. Like that was her skill set, which was great because traveling full time, there's no chance this company would exist without Tracy having been a part of it at the beginning. Because I did not have the bandwidth to do it all and do my consulting job. Right. She was so valuable to the process of getting things together. Like the deck. We put together a deck in end of February, using the photos from the first retreat and with Bob and Ross and outlining value and all of that. And Derek has a really good eye for design and is great with that stuff. So he helped make it look great. And
was that for the conference that you went to?
This was so I could email everybody I knew in my life and say, this is what I'm doing now.
Right. So this is like the point where you were like, okay, we did a beta test. It didn't blow up and it still doesn't feel perfect, but we've got to go figure out if people want to work with us. So you kind of shifted into this, like, how do we wrap this up as a product and like ask people if they want to do it kind of stage. And I'm honestly asking because I'm like, what was next after that? Like, was there another client or
So the first paying client that I had was Joey Vitale.
Oh, okay.
And that was through my network. That was through emailing everybody I knew and then passing it along. And one of the people's hands it ended up in was Joey's.
Right.
And Joey reached out and was like, can we chat? And got on the phone, got to know him, understood that he was a lawyer.
Okay.
And he had a very different business model than most lawyers. I did know that. And he's so lovely. He's awesome. And sent him over a proposal and he signed it that same day. I was like, okay, here we go. So that was the beginning of...
certainly the seed of what this business looks like now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question.
And he said, lawyers need this. And I remember thinking, I'm not ready to, I didn't make that call to niche down for another year almost, I don't think. Well, less than that. But it was a bit working with Joey and really quarter after quarter working with Joey and his team. And I was like, I get it. I started to have a glimpse into how this translates really well from the world that I was in.
Right.
Speaking of Joey, but all attorneys. This is somebody who went to school for something extremely specific, and they're usually really good at that. And if they decide to go out on their own, there's so many things that they haven't been trained on, but they have their own business. So helping them get organized mentally and organizationally around the growth that they want to see can be life-changing for someone who that's not what they went to school for. And so I started to see, okay, this makes sense. I can absolutely see where this could be a thing. Still full-time at the consulting job that year. And we got pregnant that July of 2018 and lost a baby in October or November. October, end of October.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a thing.
Yeah, that's probably a podcast or
yeah
of its own.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, that period, you know, because I remember we went to New York for a few weeks and
we knew that we had to have surgery to end the pregnancy, basically.
Sure. Yeah. And so the challenges of that, to me, at least in the context of the business, were that you were right in the middle of that sort of, and I'm sort of speaking to the folks who, I guess, start things on the side or test ideas or test new business lines, etc. You were well into the like, I see that there's something that I'd like to be doing all day, every day. I'm not there yet. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And then obviously alongside that, life always happens. And that's a big example of that. But I mean, you know, also right at ish after that, we did get pregnant and here we are with a toddler and you're running a business. And so like,
there's a lot in between those two.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is like the life track and the path from like, this is something I hope can happen to this is something like I'm now doing, but I'm doing it on the side. That period, like that fall, give or take, was the heart of that period. It was like, it's a big step to dive in and do it nights and weekends. It's a big step to find customers who are relying on you to deliver on X, Y, or Z. And then it's arguably an even bigger step to get from that point to something that you can in some ways justify making a big career decision in your life and, you know, leaving your day job behind and making a go at it.
I hadn't done that yet, but yeah.
I know, that's what I'm saying. But we were right kind of in that gray zone of like, how is that going to happen? Right?
Right.
Like,
oh, yeah.
How will that happen? And
leaving that salary,
Right. Salary is a big part of it. Like your earnings are a big part of it. You're also clearly planning for a family. So your security and your like ability to make dumb decisions is starting to like reduce, right? Your risk tolerance drops like significantly. And I was also in a place in which my job was looking uncertain to some degree. Like in terms of like a year or two timeline, it felt as if my job, which was pretty darn secure and a good gig and, you know, really half of the equation for us, it was kind of like, I'm probably going to have to make a decision similar to you at some point in this vague 2-year window. And so we were kind of right around then, we were kind of like, how the hell do we both figure out what the end point is here, right? Like, when does Derek go on to the next thing and what is that next thing? When does Melissa go on to the next thing? We have a lot more clarity about what that next thing might be, but it's also this sort of young, fragile business. And then, you know, alongside that, life kind of happens. And so I'm just like thinking back to that particular fall specifically, and it was, I mean, it was a lot. There were like a lot of things on the board as like, well, I don't know, maybe like, whoa, there's a lot of decisions we got to make here.
A couple things. You did have that job, but you were also consulting quite a bit with like,
I was consulting nights and
on
weekends.
The side.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the reason we were in New York right before the surgery. For that, you had your team retreat with the company you were consulting with.
Sure, no.
So like, you were doing two things. I mean, you were spending a lot of time on consulting, and then you still had your full-time thing. I mean, so you were more than half the equation at that point. You were sitting nice on income, and
for a window, but I guess what I'm saying is like we just had a lot of things that looked like they were somewhat temporary.
Yeah,
and we had ambitions about what the next things would be. Like, what do you want to be doing next, right? Like, people find themselves in those positions pretty frequently, I think. Well, some don't, but some do. And the two of us being in that position at the same time, I think was like a pretty sort of mentally volatile period of time. And
then that happens. And so then it's like, okay. Yeah. I mean, it felt like, as many of you probably have direct experience with, it felt like it just lit everything on fire. Like I didn't see a path for I remember, by the way, they should talk about this more. The hormone like letdown or whatever after just the hormone shift that's so sudden and your body wasn't expecting after
losing a baby,
the pregnancy was ended. It was like I was dark for a bit and made me afraid to even have another kid. Because if I was that dark again, so there was a stretch like through, I think probably didn't touch the business the month of November. I had Joey's retreat in December because it's like turn of the quarter. So I think I did that. And it kind of woke me back up into getting back into it. But I didn't really, January, I like put my head back in the game. But I remember it was a bit before I felt like I had any bandwidth to do that.
Okay.
January came around and you and I started having more serious conversations about, I started shifting my focus back to the business and about like, when can I leave this consulting job? Because I cannot push at velocity work anymore than I am. And I need more time to give this to get clients and to get out there and continue to learn and continue to validate the product. And finally in March.
Is that when you transitioned?
Well, no, actually one more thing. So Tracy and I decided to split ways. It was amicable. It was just like, it really was amazing. It's such
shout out Tracy.
I know. She's so amazing. In March 1st and 2nd, we went to a business conference and that's when we decided to niche down to law because the woman in the room said, if you are sitting in this room and you have not picked a niche, you can just leave because I can't help you. And I was like, oh man, okay, we got to just make a call. And I loved working with Joey and I was like, this is what we're doing. I know I can make a difference no matter who I work with if I will plug my whole self into it. So these are the peeps that are getting it. And we made that call. And after that conference, we had a lot of clarity and we decided to split too. So then, Velocity, it was me with Velocity Work alone. And you and I that month decided, okay. Let's ski down this slope. Like, I think that's the way you described it, which is funny because you said that at the beginning of the podcast. But shared, like we decided together I was going to leave the consulting.
Yeah. And it was partly that, as I said, it really felt like everything was a little bit of a tectonic plate. Like it was all shifting a little. And as you mentioned, I kind of wanted my focus to shift. And some of the security around the day job was starting to feel like it was kind of getting out of my control. I was at a really big company at that point through some acquisitions of smaller companies. And so it was just an environment that like I hadn't decided, quote unquote, to be in. And in those environments, as anyone who's worked in one of those environments knows, like you don't have total control, right? And so I had this sense that like by choice or via the sort of natural machinations of a large firm, the timeline wasn't forever. And so we kind of were talking about all this, and in my head, it made sense for us to try to actively control how things lined up, like what went first, and or control the things we had control over. And so we made that sort of mutual call, like you do your thing, and we kind of accelerate it or we green light it and you go, and I'll kind of hold down the fort, so to speak. And
little did we know.
well, yeah, I mean, it's super ironic because
Mhm.
I think that was a smart call. I think
do
that was
too.
the right call. And for our family and for you and for all that. But you can't control everything. And frankly, it would have been worse had we just kind of waited for the world to like make these things happen to us, right? So then you left your job and began working on Velocity Work full time. Well,
you're missing some things there. I
oh,
put in my notice
oh,
and gave them 6 weeks because I knew all the responsibilities I had on my plate. I wanted to handle that well. And 6 weeks was a long time. And I didn't want to do 6 weeks. And they didn't want, like, normally they wouldn't allow that. But they were like, yep, you have 6 weeks. Like, we need you to do this well. And I was willing to do that. 1 week after I put in my notice, we found out we were pregnant. 2 weeks after that, you found out you were laid off. So this did not line up the way we had planned.
It might be the trauma. I can't remember. It felt more spread out than that. But yeah.
No. I mean,
okay.
you knew it was, they announced that this is what was happening. They were shutting down your team. So you had till the end of June or mid-July, I think, which you negotiated longer, but that was it, which it was our benefits.
Yeah. Right.
Which was the thing, because not only the money, like, okay, we'll figure out the money, super not convenient that we have to do that, but we'll figure that part out. But the benefits were, with me just finding out I was pregnant, was
healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a really, really unfortunate, massive dynamic of entrepreneurship in the United States, right? Like, in particular for women, but for families. It's fine if you're a 24-year-old guy, right, and you want to make some mistakes and go out and try and like start companies. I think, by the way, that's super hard too. But the reality is life stacks up, and or you're planning for a family, or you're married, and there's two people to consider, and healthcare is just this massive weight, and it's a huge conversation in the entrepreneurial community. But we kind of like hit it on the head. It was like, hey, one of us is leaving our job. Hey, we're pregnant. Hey, the other one of us just got notice, basically. And my notice, as you mentioned, was a few months, right? I can't remember exactly how that played out.
It was like 8 weeks or something.
Yeah. And I extended it a bit. And I mean, really to put a bow on that, like we ended up paying for Cobra for about 6 or 7 months, which is not cheap, folks.
I think we were paying at the time $2,200
$2,200 a month.
Yeah,
and
for healthcare.
Also something you don't want to be doing when you're starting a business as a family, right? Like, so that put a lot of pressure on the back end of that year. And
But, well, I don't know. What were you going to say?
Well, I mean, but we did that. We did it.
We did it, and I grew. Like I was pregnant in 2019. This is 2019. Found out I was pregnant in April, and I think looking back, it just lit a fire. It was like, we got to go. Like, you got to make this work. So I worked. I just kept one foot in front of the other. The best thing I knew how to do. How do I provide value? How do I provide value in ways that I'm on people's radar, and how to provide value? Like, I just kept trying one foot in front of the other. Started the podcast August of that year.
That's right.
And because I thought, okay, this is a way to provide value, like free content. I tried everything. I launched a program that was called Velocity 2020, which was strategic planning for 2020. And it was great. I learned a lot from it. I probably got to work with 6 law firm owners, which was amazing. And referrals and word of mouth. And I mean, so I think that year we did $50K from April till the end of the year. And I'm proud of that. That's not much money, but I was really working. I was working as smart as I knew how. And then I had the baby January of 2020. And when did you start with Xer? Was it 2020 or 20? No, it was 2020.
It was. It was that summer.
You were only consulting with that same company that we were referring to earlier.
Yeah, I was consulting. And Yeah, and yeah.
Why are you laughing?
I mean, it's just really fun. And then COVID happened.
Yeah.
Like best laid plans, right? Like we
Uh-huh.
kind of had beginning of this period that we're talking about where it was like, okay, you want to do your own thing. On some level, I wanted to do my own thing,
Mhm.
right? And it was like, okay, you go first, and then I'll go, and it'll be great.
Mhm.
And I mean, we just described the next 6 months of that,
Mhm.
which was very, very difficult, or actually, I guess over a year. And then, so then I was doing my own thing too,
Mhm.
and it was in digital e-commerce, and COVID happened like
Mhm.
what 12 weeks later or 10 weeks later, and
After Lock was
the
born.
e-commerce industry disappeared overnight.
Yeah.
and we had a baby.
Wait, 10 weeks later, 10 weeks after what?
We were just talking about that January period where we had the baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was like, you could have made the argument. It was like, okay, from here, like, we'll go from here and we'll go up.
Oh, I totally thought we were going up fast. Yeah.
And then,
Which
and
actually
then it
we
was
did,
like,
but not the way I thought.
COVID. I mean, I think I laughed because COVID materially affected what I was doing in a deep way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways, you were fortunate. I think it didn't like destroy or take the air out of what you were doing necessarily.
No,
I think
but
it did in some ways. But.
No, but that's not because of the way I had to change my whole business model.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, basically, by the way, we had Lachlan January 11th, 2020, and that was an insane year prior to that. Absolutely everything that we didn't want to happen in the order, like it all just went against us.
Yeah.
And also, it's worth mentioning, I don't think that was a bad year.
No.
Like I look back on it, there was a lot of happiness and a lot of joy, and I was doing the work I loved.
Yeah.
It was a grind, but not because of the work. I didn't like the work. It was because I was trying to figure it out and get the business off the ground. And
no, it was a pivot.
I was so happy to be doing full time what I had been wanting to do full time for so long that it felt so good. And yeah, it was not convenient that there wasn't a ton of income and we were kind of in the position that we were in. It wasn't easy, but I have good memories from that year.
So do I.
Yeah, then 2020. So we had Lachlan. I came back in the middle of March. So I had like 2 full months off, which was great. I had set that up. It was okay. The private client said, so 2019, I got another 2-3 private clients. And that's the only thing I was offering at the time was private client work, which is quarterly strategic planning, it's a bigger investment, right? Like it's
a big ask. Yeah.
Back then it was about $18K a year. And I mean, now it's more, but back then when I was lifting things off the ground, that's what it was. And so I actually had private clients that I was working with and I had scheduled their retreats. So it was okay that I had maternity leave. That was the only work I did was private clients. And then COVID happened. So right when I came back, COVID was a thing. And I knew that there's no chance in hell I was going to go out and get business. People weren't spending that money. Nobody knew what was going on.
Well, and in-person retreats was kind of the focus. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I could have done virtual, still tried to package that up, but no one was going to invest in that, right? That no one knew what was happening. Right. So I had to ask the question, like go back to the question of like, how can I provide value right now? I am watching people freak out in these Facebook groups and whatever, like just as everybody is. How can I provide value right now? And so I started this accountability group for staying focused on the things that you had control over.
Right.
And that went well. And that was free. It's a daily call. Get on the phone every day. Tell me what you're going to do. Did you do it or not? And so that turned into sprints.
Yeah.
And sprints became a backbone of our business for a while. And people who were in sprints wanted the months that there wasn't a sprint. They wanted like, hey, what now? Like, what do we do? And so that's how we formed Mastery Group, is to get these people to have some consistency with focusing on the right things. And then that's slowed up. Yeah.
Well, I think
it's been a long time. It took a while.
It's the iteration, right? It's the sort of, and some of it in many cases ends up being reactive to some degree, but it was the exact same thing at the beginning. It was like, how do you suss out the important things as quickly as you can? How do you learn what you need to know and not focus on the fluff, not focus on things that don't matter? And then, this is later in the business, you're thrown literal curveballs. The world doesn't like stop and start at your convenience. And so, but you're already sort of conditioned, I think, on some level to just iterate. Like, okay, well, all right, well, what are the constraints, and how do I find the sort of value point? And so I'm going to try this thing, and I'm going to make it free, and I'm going to just engage and see if it works, see if it breaks, see if it feels almost right, etc. And to me, on some level, that was the point in the business where sort of a clarity of vision started to take form, and you started to really try to work the product offering in an iterative fashion in a way that worked well for the clients and community and for you and the business. So it was like trying to continue. It was kind of month over month, because you've in some ways like operate in particular, that I'd say that year, it was like you operated kind of like, a month out or 2 months out. Like, what am I going to kind of offer the group of people who are now listening to the podcast, who are now engaging in various Facebook groups, et cetera, et cetera. And it was almost like every 2 or 3 months, there was a tweak, right? I know. Yeah.
Every month.
But it feels like velocity work. Like, it feels like that's the point where velocity work was very much becoming what it is.
Yeah, definitely.
And to be honest, the experimentation and the iteration so far has part of what velocity work is. Like,
I'll never
you're
stop
still
that.
doing it.
Yeah. I think that's the reason that we have continued to grow as quickly as we've grown, because we have grown quickly. And I'll never stop that. It's because what it requires is you tuning into your customer, period. And if I stop doing that, I don't know, I think I'd be in trouble. Like, I think a business needs to be tuned into the customer and what they need. And I have strengths that I bring, and I have frameworks that I bring, and I have tools that I bring, but how you deliver those things matters. And if something doesn't land, it matters. And you have to get the feedback. You have to be watching. You have to be tweaking constantly, which is kind of stressful for a team, because, like, it feels like a startup. And
no, it is a startup.
It is a startup, but I don't ever want to lose that mentality of it's first. It has to be first. It always has been, because sort of out of necessity. I viewed it as out of necessity. The customer had to be first. I had to tune in hard to that. I remember, I was just thinking, I kind of just said, well, yeah, I wanted to, after maternity leave, COVID happened, I wanted to sit down and figure out, like, okay, how can I provide value? That was actually, if I go back to that moment, I remember the moment sitting there thinking, what can I do? What can I do? I don't need to make money off of these people. Like, everybody's freaking out. How can I help? Like, how can we come together in a way that's just helpful? And it wasn't like a brainstorm session. It just was like a duh.
Like, I can do
I know exactly what I'm good at.
Right.
Let's get on the phone and let's do this. And not the phone, Zoom, but you know what I mean? It sounds easy. It sounds like, oh, she did that and that and that and that. But everybody on this call probably has something they can relate to this with. That was a moment that I had a choice. I don't know why I plugged in the way I plugged in, as hard as I plugged in that moment. When I look back on it, it feels like one of those moments that changed the trajectory of everything for good. It was never going to be the same after if I just asking the question, what can I do and how can I provide value? Not thinking about the money, just that. Nobody else was going to be willing to get on the phone every day with people. And I was totally willing, because I knew it would be the thing that helped. And yeah, I don't know. It's just funny to think back how meaningful that moment was. It wasn't just a blip on the radar. It changed everything.
Yeah, and it wasn't what you were doing prior.
No.
Right? It was not at all. And so I think it was an interesting sort of like call to action, in a sense. Like, I mean, COVID has had such profound effects on everyone, right? In such big and nuanced ways. But I think because of the kind of person you are, you're basically sort of like, well, I can either sit here because I'm not going to go out and like market for money in this environment. I'm not going to go out and like hard sell. I'm not going to go out and try to quote unquote grow my business the way that I thought I would be growing my business. So instead, I'm just gonna pull people together on a group call because it feels like what they need. And that's like a personal decision almost.
Yes.
It wasn't really
that's a great way.
A strategic decision. I know. Yeah.
No,
and so what's interesting is that it ends up strongly influencing the roadmap of the company from that point on. And it's become like sort of part of the common thread as you build what is like the community of Velocity Work. And really like dictated what the experience for customers looked like for the rest of that window for most of COVID, right?
Well, it's still going.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more to like something better, right?
Yeah.
But like,
maybe talk a little bit about the way you're thinking about next year in the context of what the last year looked like. Because I know you're going to make some adjustments.
Yeah, we have. They're in motion. So, that was 2020, 2021. I have had such a blast. Like that point, I was having a blast with my private clients, but I didn't know that there was this other way to also just love your work and be able to deploy the work that I know in a different way. And so it was such a delight to work in a group setting. It's different than one-on-one. One-on-one is a luxury, right? But there's something really beautiful about a group and community, and watching that build bit by bit by bit by bit by bit very consistently since then has been a huge piece of the joy of the work that I've been doing. So I'm down to do more of that. And the group is getting better. I'm getting better at showing up and giving them what they need. And I'm committed to continue to do that. So 2021 was like, yes, COVID was still a thing, but it felt like a year that we haven't had before. And not since we've had a kid. We haven't had a year like that in a long time. Basically, I mean, it felt like we hit our stride. 2020, you started working for a company that's pretty amazing. A tech, AI, startup, fitness, I don't know, company. I just threw a bunch of words.
Buzzwords.
That's what it is. All those things are it. I don't know. That you started working for them in 2020, which, quickly tell people what Xer is.
Xer makes software for the health industry. So we're a digital health startup, and we build apps that work on mobile phones and laptops and are powered by emotion AI. So we basically taught an AI how to recognize what it's seeing when you're doing things in front of it on a camera. So if you imagine like physical therapy or range of motion, recovery exercises, and all the way down to like gait analysis and all kinds of like interesting little health use cases. And it's a very mission-driven group. It's also local, based in Denver. Started by a college friend of mine who I always kind of wanted to work with on the ground, and here we are. And it's been an awesome run. Yeah,
so it started with them officially in September 2020, but before then, contract work. And then 2020 has been amazing. And then Q3 hit. You needed 40 stitches in your face at one point. You broke your wrist. 2021. Yeah. So did I say 2020? Yeah, 2021. And so Q3 was really 3 and 4 have been really hard for you. So hard for you. So hard for you. And for me in different ways. But like, my heart like breaks when I think about what you went through this year.
So I apparently am clumsy, and I fell and I ended up with 40 stitches in my eyebrow. And then 3 weeks later, I fell down some stairs at a hotel and I broke my wrist badly. And so in retrospect, the stitches in the head is not that big of a deal. And losing your right hand when you're right-handed and you're working on a tech startup is a pretty big deal. So yeah, I mean, I just started typing again 2 weeks ago. So it's been a super tough fall and early winter. I mean, in many ways, productivity wise, but also, you know, I didn't change a diaper for 2 months. So it's been, you know, it's been a challenge on us too, because we've got a very active toddler and there's all kinds of things that need to, I didn't drive him to the nanny for about 2 months either, which I just kind of my job. So yeah, still, you know, the hits keep on coming.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're done.
The whole point of this podcast is that they're not done.
Well, I mean, those done. I told him I was going to Kathy Bates him and just keep him in bed with hammering his legs every so often so he can't leave. Yeah. It's totally a sick joke, but it's just, like every time, my fear, like there's a mechanism in my brain that kicks in faster than it used to with like, oh God, what happened? Like, just I'm bracing myself for more of what you've been through.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this year has been amazing for us professionally. This quarter was super hard for you and us, but you, man, like God.
Yeah. No, but I think part of the reason this podcast sensible-ish or like timely was that 2021, in particular for you and for Velocity Work, but certainly for us, has been a great year. And that's the point at which it's always easy to just forget that the year and a half or the 2 years or the 3 years or the 5 years or the 7 years, but whatever. But what it took to get there, where it's like you're doing the thing, you're kind of through the light, you're out of the tunnel, you're like on to the next phase of your life, and you're always kind of looking forward and up. And it's easy to forget that the beginning and the grit and the hurdles and all that, that's actually part of what makes velocity work. And it's, to me, and I'm a marketer, so like I think about story and narrative, and there's a bad time and there's good times to reflect and to like talk about that stuff. And I think because in some ways 2021 has been a good year, but it's not even about it being good or great. It's like 2021, Velocity Work has existed every day of that year. It has taken a form that looks like it will probably look-ish for the next year or 2 or 3. Every business evolves, but it's really found its footing, right? Like you are constantly evolving. You have already sort of planned out a year next year that looks different than 2021, but it's still Velocity Work. Like Velocity Work is sort of established in a way. And yeah, you could easily just kind of like accept that for what it is or accept that as normal. And it's like, no, actually, you know, most of the life of this company was pretty up and down and pretty challenging and took a lot of damn work, right? And personal and professional. So I think that's what led to us having this conversation in public.
We do talk about this stuff.
Yeah, we talk about it.
Just you and I.
Right.
It's been a while though. So I think recently we were talking about it. It was like, wow,
we haven't really looked back.
Yeah. And the other thing too, the other reason I wanted to talk about this is, you know, at the beginning I said I watch clients go through hard stuff and curveballs you can't see coming. And it's not the work. Like I think about the things that are hard and work related. Like I remember tears over certain things that were like, like it didn't line up, or like I did all this prep and then, you know, clients tried to buy and the page didn't work, or that like all those little frustrations that are natural and normal, like errors, and you have to fix the errors and you have to like friction inside the business.
Right?
Mistakes.
Screwing up.
And there's been some of that that's so frustrating, but that's not what I mean, and how I've been reflecting lately about just the hard stuff of being a business owner is what I just mean navigating your life as a human with a business and with a life and all the variables that can get thrown into the mix and the curveballs, and you still keep going. That tenacity to continue on is, to me,
I also think part of the Sorry.
Well, I just think it's beautiful. And
Yeah.
I witness
No, it's
people.
heroic. There's nothing.
Is.
It's nothing short of heroic.
And I don't think of myself as I'm not saying I'm a hero. That's not what I'm saying. But I get to witness people all the time who are up against things. It's like, oh my God. But everybody has their own version of that at certain points where it's like, oh, okay, you find a way. You rise to the occasion and you meet yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that it's something that, and I think in general we're talking about entrepreneurship, but there's so many different forms of that, right? Like you can be running in a successful business right now, but you're the owner, buck stops with you, and the business has to innovate. And COVID has frankly done that probably to every owner of every company, all the way up, right? But it's very easy to get desensitized because part of the game is, okay, what's next? Right? Like part of it is building up thick skin and scars and
maturing as an owner.
Yeah. And learning and iterating and kind of keeping your eyes in front of you. And so it's very, very easy to sort of get desensitized to how hard it is, really. Just every day. It's hard. Right. But also to sort of forget, like, along the way, you took a real punch and you got through it. Right. And a lot of those real punches tend to be personal life, right? They're not always inside the business. They're just kind of happening around you. And, you know, part of what your job is sort of just figuring out how to get through it. And it's like grin and bear it mentality sometimes. And I think it's important that this is why I believe like entrepreneurs should always be talking to entrepreneurs, because you're sort of living in this sort of space that is very, very difficult to explain. But you have this sense of what everyone's going through because it's basically just hard with a capital H. And,
but most people listening to this, not all, and that's important to note, and there isn't anything wrong with that, but most people listening to this, it's not going to be another way. They're not going to go, they don't want to work, like this is what they're doing, which is why you're committed that hard to what you're doing. You keep showing up.
Yeah.
And
that's a choice.
It is a choice.
Often. And it's choosing a hard path. And I often say in some ways it's masochism. It's like, you just know it's going to suck. And
it's going to be great.
And it's going to be great. And you're sort of, you know, you don't meet many folks who are not in the position of like, I can see this place in the future where it feels like it'll be a little easier. That's often actually not totally true, but the reality is it's hard now, and it was probably hard last year too, and the year before that. So it's like, I think sometimes there's a lot of value in taking a step back and saying, yeah, wow, look at how far up the mountain you are, right? Like, yeah.
The other thing too, I know we should wind this down soon, but I've been thinking a lot about all the challenges. I've been reflecting a lot. I was mentioning like in the business stuff that's frustrating, but then there's life stuff that's curveballs, but also the curveballs that happen inside of work, right? Like losing key team members, and it starts and stops with you. You got to like get yourself back in the game. Like there's all kinds of curveballs, and you sign up for all of it when you're a business owner. And it's not always all terrible, but there's going to be parts that are super not fun, super hard, anxiety producing. Like I remember when Kristen was with me from like the beginning till this summer, and she left. She was starting a family, making like new chapter of life. And I remember when she told me that, the level of anxiety that I experienced, just head to toe, felt like my insides were on fire. Like, what am I going to do? Because she was such a big piece of everything we were doing. And you have to take a breath, and you do the best thing that you know how, and you keep putting one foot in front of the other. You line yourself up with like, what's next? And you get yourself there, and it's like a different level. You're playing a different game. You're at a different level. It's not better than Kristen, but it's like, oh, this forced me to think in new ways. This forced these things, and now I'm in a different place. And that's what the hard stuff does. It just forces you to keep leveling up and evolving how you think and how you operate. And I don't know. It just makes you.
I think people maybe don't realize, or they forget, like that's the job. Like,
yeah, no, I agree.
The job is to essentially be the person who is going to handle the next challenge. Like, that's the job. It's not the work. It's not the writing. It's not the skill. It's not the trade. And I'm talking about like the job of leadership, the job of owning, the job of sort of taking things into your own hands and being an entrepreneur and starting something or pushing something forward. That is the number one bullet point on the job description. Is it's not going to be easy, and you are going to have to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and I think a lot of people convince themselves that that will go away, right? That bullet point will get solved, and it doesn't. It will never go away. And so I think it's actually easier to just internalize the job you have and to wake up every day knowing that, because it, and we talk about this a little bit, but like, because the emotion and the anxiety don't contribute at all. And so the inevitability of it, maybe, I think, can help people sort of desensitize themselves, frankly, to the stuff that shows up in front of you, because it is literally what you signed up for.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I have,
and it's
thought
also
a lot
what makes
about,
you great.
Yeah.
It's why this is heroic. It's why this is worth doing. It's why you should be proud of yourself. It's why any success is success. It's like, because it's not pretty, and you're doing that job. Like,
and you're doing that job, and you're building for yourself and for the world, but like, you are building something that's meaningful to you and serving people.
Yeah.
The other thing that is worth mentioning that I've been thinking about a lot is that the other reason I'm pumped about doing this and is successful, which not easily, like that sounds pretty successful. Like, we're growing fast, but I deal with everything that you were just talking about. Like, it's the same for me, but I'm doing it with everything I've learned and everything I teach. And I think it's good for me to build a business the way I'm telling everybody else to do it. And it works. Like, I'm proud of what we do for people, because doing that has been really fruitful. It's really helped us. And I see it, of course, helping our clients, but I don't work hard not to just talk the talk. Like, we do have team retreats. We do plan extremely well. We do care about honoring our plan. And it is those little things that make the difference, and how you show up for those things. I don't know if you know this, but everything you just said, something we say all the time in Velocity Work is, well, number one, the best way to grow a business is to grow the person who's running it. That's a quote from Chris Plackey. And then another thing we say is, who do you have to be in order to have what you want to have? And that's kind of what you're saying. It's just, I'm saying it in more woo-woo language than you're used to, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you got to make yourself the person who's willing to wake up every day and do the hard thing. Enjoys doing the hard thing. And just, there's a way to like the fact that this sucks. I think that's like tough for people. And I know that everyone's sort of makeup is different, but at least for me, it's easier to operate in the mindset that something hard is about to happen, right? It's just like the job. And so when it happens, it's basically, okay, what next? Or, okay, how do we move forward? Yeah. And it is a muscle that strengthens. So like, when you are aware of it, right? And not just kind of feeling like you're like flying through a forest and getting hit along the way, but you're actually like, no, this is my job. Actually, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and there's going to be something new, and it's not going to, and I may not
anticipate it.
Yeah. It's like, anticipate the hardness, and you'll get hardened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. This is fun.
Yeah.
I'll walk through the past several years.
Onward.
Yeah. Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers
to hard things and
to 2022.
2022. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Hey there. If you enjoyed this podcast, I highly recommend you come and check out Mastery Group. It is where owner attorneys come together to study this material, apply it, and thus create really big results for their firm and for their life. So come on over, velocitywork.com/join to get more information and get started. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.